I got me some of those arrows. They're shooting really nice.
Good.
Yeah, and we've been talking about the arrows for a couple weeks on the podcast, but I wanted you to hop on here and like talk about the technology and like what makes the MMT arrow different. MMT arrow different from like a standard arrow a guy would buy at the pro shop.
Yeah, there's a couple things. One is the carbon insert, the carbon tube that we install on the front of the arrow. So there's a 6-inch carbon tube that we install on the front, which elongates the forward node of your arrow. So it helps the arrow recover after work's been applied to it. So after you shoot it, you know, if you look at this stuff like on a high-speed camera, which we've just done a ton of testing, which is really cool. Like you see some of these high-speed cameras and these arrows are just they look like they should explode. But the way that they're bending and rotating and oscillating, it's really neat to see. So, but
back up. Can you explain what a node is?
Yeah.
The node of your arrow.
So there's two spots on your arrow. There's one on towards the front of your arrow where your point or broadhead would screw into, and then there's also one on the back. And on a typical arrow, they're spots. And I say a spot, it might be like an 1/8 of an inch spot. But that's where all the movement, so the flexing, the bending, the torsion, the compression, the tension, when your arrow is doing a bunch of weird things in flight, all those forces go through those spots. Some people could say like vibration. Like you could tap that arrow on your leg and you can move your finger down the shaft, and where you feel the most vibration is the two nodes. So with that inner carbon tube on the front, it takes that node from being like an 1/8 of an inch to an inch, sometimes 1.25 inches. Sometimes it depends on what kind of point weight and point length that you have on the front of that. But essentially, we just elongated that. And ideally, that should sit on your arrow rest, especially like Dan, if you're shooting, you know, a capture style or a fixed rest, something, you know, a non-drop away, it becomes a bigger deal. But that helps the arrow recover faster. And then there's some, you know, the shaft is patented. There's a 1-to-1 weave there to help really increase the torsion strength. And also there's a safety factor there. I know a lot of guys have probably seen those images floating around social with a, you know, carbon splinters or a splintered carbon shaft through somebody's hands. And we've all probably shot an arrow and seen it explode. These arrows don't fracture, or they don't break like that. They actually fracture. So if you were, we just did some torture testing over on our YouTube channel, and we were just shooting these things into like a concrete paver, like somebody would set out like for a sidewalk, you know, and showed the different failure points and how they break and different things. So it's just we're just at the first layer of this whole thing. I mean, the concept around the builder is still not completely executed. We had a little bit of trouble on the back end with coding and outsourcing that. So we had to get a new coder in to finish building this. But ideally, we want to be able to offer several different options for folks based around the exact setup and animal that they want to chase. So we want to be able to have kinetic energy and momentum calculators built in there to let folks know, hey, if you choose to buy this arrow, this setup is going to work best on antelope and whitetail, or maybe it's a little bit heavier and you have more momentum, so it's geared more towards bigger animals like elk or moose or whatnot. So that's the idea around the e-commerce builder.
I was abusing the hell out of my arrows and actually ripped one of the feathers. And when I shot it, the feather came off, and right out of the bow, the arrow went all wonky. And what was surprising was it completely corrected itself and hit right in a group with the rest of the arrows with only 2 feathers. I would have off into space.
Right. There's a little bit of science there behind the vanes that we chose. Those vanes that your build was set up with are Arrow Vane 2 from Fire Knock, and they're designed with an airfoil. So as those things spin, it creates lift because there is more pressure on the underside of that vane than the top side, which helps with your center of pressure. So if you look at stable flight between an arrow, you have the center of gravity, which can change with like your FOC or what you're doing up front. And then on the backside, you have center of pressure. And the further away you get those 2 points, the more stable your arrow becomes. But you have to be careful because, you know, if you start your revolution rate too fast, like your spinning rate, and you tend to get some yawing and pitching in that arrow, a lot of times that is what can cause broadhead planing if you're shooting big fixed blade broadheads. So you have to be careful, like even guys shooting helicals, you got to be careful on how much offset or how much helical you put in there, because once that spin rate goes to a certain point, you're looking at like diminishing returns. Stuff gets complicated, man. At the end of the day, I mean, it gets really complicated, and pull me back in anytime. But it's like, know your setup, know how much kinetic energy and momentum you have and what you need to kill a whitetail or kill a moose or a bear or whatever it is you're hunting. Get there with the best flight trajectory and shoot whatever you have confidence in at the end of the day, because there's no right or wrong. I mean, the goal is 2 holes, and if you can do that on any animal that you're hunting, then it's a win.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like something that never gets talked about, we talk about arrows so much, and it's like no matter what arrow you have, if your bow isn't in tune, it doesn't matter, you know. Something we don't talk about enough. Everybody knows how to build a dang arrow, but they don't know how to tune a bow, you know.
100%.